welcome Kris Anne Hall.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Wow, I'm way up here. All the lights. Thank you, ladies, for a beautiful afternoon. Great conversation. We had a great time at the book signing today. It was just a blessing, and you should go to that bookstore and support people who support liberty, because there are becoming fewer and fewer of us who are willing to actually stand up for liberty. So I actually want to start off by singing a song for you, a song that I sort of wrote, and you'll understand why I say sort of when you hear it. My country is a deep, sweet land of economy, of the I sing, land where NSA does spy, land where our freedom died, from congressmen who lied, let budgets ring. My native country, the land of the shopping spree, thy revenue I love. I love thy welfare fills, thy dark green fiat bills, my heart with rapture fills for the federal gov. Let free stuff swell the breeze and fall from all the trees. Sweet Congress song, let socialists awake, let all that breathe partake, let Marxists their silence break, servitude prolong. Our fathers got to be author of liberty, to thee we sing. When will our land be bright with freedom's holy light, purged from this soulless blight? Great God our King. My heart sometimes gets so full that I can't help but weep for our children. The disadvantage that I have, I know history very, very well. Patrick Henry said, I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that's the lamp of experience. I know no way to judge the future but by the past. See, our framers didn't invent liberty. There is nothing in the Constitution that is new or novel. They inherited every aspect of the Constitution. Not because they had a crystal ball, not because they had a burning bush experience from God, but because they knew their history, they knew where they came from so well, they knew exactly what we would see today. And I'm watching history unfold right in front of my eyes. And it makes me weep, because we don't have to do this. We don't have to be here right now. We don't have to be in this situation that we're in right now. All of the protections that were necessary to guard us from this were put in place in 1787. But we've been lied to for so long about who America is. We've been lied to for so long about who our states are. And we've been lied to for so long about who we are. that we simply no longer know what to do. We no longer know where we're supposed to be going. Of the people that I teach, the most common thing that I hear is, Kris Anne, what you teach is so inspirational. I'm ready to go do something right now, but what? What do I do? What needs to be done? I believe the question erupts from a dilemma twofold. Number one, we simply don't know. Number two, we're so overwhelmed by what we see. We think, okay, so I figured out what I need to do, but my goodness, what could I possibly do to overcome the level of corruption, the level of evil, the level of lawlessness that we see in government today? What kind of impact can one person possibly have? And I think that is the most self-defeating in our motivation. Because we're inundated, I won't even say daily, but every minute now, with some media bombardment about what's going on. If I had one piece of advice for you, as hard as it may be, you need to choose 1 week out of every month to go on a media fast. 1 week out of every month, turn off the radio, turn off the television, spend time in the garden, sip tea in the gazebo, smoke a cigar in the backyard. Do these things, and it will reunite you with a proper perspective. Because we live in a media-controlled society. We live, literally, and you don't notice this until you take this week off. We live like this. All the time. You know? Because that's what our blood pressure is like all the time. I have a radio show 6 days a week. 6 days a week. I mean, this is what I do. So every minute of every day, I was telling Miss Shirley today, we were sitting at the book signing, and I was looking at my cell phone, and I'm constantly getting emails and constantly getting texts and all this stuff and answering questions and doing business. And I told her, I said, sometimes it feels like I'm always working. Because life is my job. Our everyday life is my job. So I don't even get a break when I'm not on the radio or not teaching. Because I live with a husband who's a patriot like I am, and he preaches what I teach from the pulpit. So I go to church and I hear the same thing. By the way, if your pastor doesn't, you need to find a new one. But I want to suggest to you, because I get the sense that we have a room full of people who are leaders in this desire to preserve liberty and restore the republic that we know. If you want to be useful in the movement, you must take a week out of every month and desensitize, get resensitized. You have to do that or you will go insane. You can't live like this. I want to encourage you to take that week. And I mean, don't even listen to Rush, Beck, or Hannity for a whole week. Pick up a book that you haven't read in years that has absolutely nothing to do with politics. I said to my husband, I need a vacation. We need to go on vacation for a week. I said, I need to unplug. I got to get away from everything. So we went to the beach, and I had to, we're at a hotel, so I got to walk out of the hotel like this because CNN is on the TV. I practically have to walk through the boardwalk like this because everybody's talking about something If you want to go somewhere, he says, we're going to have to leave the country. But that's not going to work either. What is it? We need you. We need you. Thomas Paine said, these are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldiers and the sunshine patriots will shrink from the service of the country, but those who stand by her now will deserve the love and thanks of generations to come. Can I let you on a little secret? The summer soldiers and the sunshine patriots are not the liberals. They're not the progressives. The summer soldiers and the sunshine patriots are those who stood beside Thomas Paine, who stood beside Samuel Adams, who stood beside Dr. Warren and James Otis Jr. and Benjamin Franklin, and stood with the women like Mercy Otis Warren and Penelope Barker when the start was happening, and they said, we want liberty, we'll fight with you to the end. And then, when it became hot and heavy, then when the sacrifices became a little bit greater, I wouldn't even say great, I mean a little bit greater, then they were like, well, you know, maybe not me. You know, I can't, if I do that, I'll lose my job. I can't lose my job. Are you kidding me? If I lose my job, then I won't have any money for my house, my family won't have any money to eat. You know, I mean, we gotta work. And I can't do that because I'll lose my job. I can't do that because the IRS might get me. I can't do that because the neighbors will talk about me. I can't do that because my family will ostracize me. There are always excuses why I can't, because the sacrifice is too great. Thomas Paine continued and said, heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods. And how can such a great a gift as liberty not come at so great a price? The summer soldiers are the ones who claim themselves to be patriots, but when the sacrifice was necessary, it was too much. If you don't take care of yourselves, you will be summer soldiers and sunshine patriots. I want to tell you from my heart, I quit every day. And then the next morning I start over again. There are some times where I quit for an entire day. And I mean in my heart, I'm done. But it's in my heart. I can't get rid of it. And my husband, when he's counseling young men who feel led to be preachers and pastors, he says the best advice I can give you is, if you ever feel like quitting, quit. I mean, don't even question it, just quit. Because if you really have a call, quitting will drive you crazy. If you have a call, take care of yourself. We have a tendency to live sacrificially. That's who we are by the nature of being who we are in this battle. But we are the generals in this Liberty First Brigade. And if the generals don't take care of themselves, your troops will fall away. So there's my bit of advice for you. Let me explain to you something else, generals. How many of you are veterans? Okay? You spent a whole lot more time training than you did fighting, didn't you? Most of my training, you know, in peacetime, was sweeping dirt. We had a place where we held formations in Monterey, California. It was a big dirt field, and that's what we had to do every afternoon. We had to go sweep the dirt. So you can guess I was in the Army. I mean, that's the logic of the Army. That's what we do. We do really smart things like sweeping dirt. But we trained and trained and trained, and we had this motto, you will sweat like you bleed. We are in training. You must have your troops in training. And having your troops in training must mean truth. When tyranny becomes the leadership, truth becomes an enemy. And you have got to arm your people with the truth. If there's another piece of advice I could give you as leaders of groups, I would say vet your speakers like you want to vet your candidates. I have seen people invite speakers in to speak and went, oh my goodness. I've had people come to me and say, Kris Anne, we have this constitutional lawyer come and teach us. And my first thought was, oh God. And they said, but Kris Anne, he said so many things that contradicted what you said. I'm like, of course, he's a constitutional lawyer. Constitutional lawyers don't know, let me put it this way. 99% of constitutional lawyers know very, very little about the Constitution. Law schools do not teach the Constitution. They teach constitutional law. There's a big difference because the primary focus of a constitutional law class is to brainwash law students who will be your future lawyers and be your future judges, to brainwash them to believe that judges know more about the Constitution than the men who wrote it. After all, the Supreme Court set that precedent in 1803 with their opinion in Marbury versus Madison, where they declared themselves the supreme rulers of the universe. Now, of course, if you go to law school, you get the opportunity to be a member of the supreme rulers of the universe when you want to perpetuate that line, so you get a chance to be a supreme ruler. Interestingly enough, if you go to Harvard, since Alida Kagan was dean of Harvard Law, you don't even have to take constitutional law. Alida Kagan removed constitutional law from the graduation requirement and replaced it with international law. That might be a blessing, though. I mean, really, because that means that your law students from Harvard don't have the dangerous knowledge and arrogance about the Constitution that all the other ones do. See, we've got to arm our people with the truth, which means we have to vet our speakers like we want to vet our candidates. How many of you want to vet candidates? How many of you have tried to vet your candidates with forms and they just completely ignore you and they won't say anything, they refuse? Vet your speakers like you do your candidates. Make sure they're constitutionally proficient. Make sure if they're going to come and speak to you about economics, that they don't have mission creep and start speaking about other things. Keep them on focus. That's one thing that my husband had pounded into my head when we're doing this thing, to stay away from mission creep. I speak all over the country. Last year I taught 265 times in 22 states. And when I get before people, we often do question and answers, and people ask me all kinds of questions. And I tell them, look, I don't know everything about everything. I don't want to know everything about everything. I don't even want to know the things that I know sometimes. But the good news for you is I'm not running for office, so I'm not afraid to tell you I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not going to wing it and make it up as I go. Because what I teach is very dear to me. It is my passion. It is my life's breath. And I don't want to mess that up. Because I got diarrhea of the mouth and constipation of the brain. Bring your people the truth. We have a lot of lies to stand out for. A lot of lies. We had an interesting time in the bookstore today. Had the UPS guy. We were stalking them, weren't we? And we were right by the front door. So they would walk by, and hi, my name is Kris Anne Hall. And so the UPS guy seems a bit confident in his knowledge. Do you think we destroyed the Constitution when we gave women the right to vote? I said, well, just if we're going to be accurate, we didn't give women the right to vote. Women have always had the right to vote in this country. There is nothing in the Constitution that ever prohibited women from voting. As a matter of fact, women voted in this country until 1807, when corrupt politicians on the state level started monkeying with who could vote and who couldn't vote, because they wanted to make it easier for their friends to get to the ballot box and make it impossible for their enemies to go. Sound familiar? Yeah. Because really, we didn't invent tyranny either. I said, go read the 19th Amendment. You'll see what I'm telling you is true just by reading the 19th Amendment. The 19th Amendment does not give women the right to vote. It recognizes that they already have that right and says that it cannot be taken away. Did you see his face? He's like, oh, well, maybe I better come read your book or something, or listen to you speak then. Just saying. Okay. Your people come to your groups with a confidence in a whole bunch of things that just aren't so. Even even those people who feel comfortable in the Constitution have been taught by the very same textbooks and the very same history books that are filled with revision and lies. Who was the first man to die in the Revolutionary War? Anybody know his name? Kris Anne. Very good. You are now in the top 8% just by knowing Kris Anne's name. Kris Anne was a freed slave who had become a whaler for the merchant marines. Now their ship was docked in the Boston harbor. He heard an alarm go off on his ship, ran up deck to put out the fire, because that's what an alarm means on a ship. Only he didn't find a fire, he found his own government picking up arms against his own people. Kris Anne swam back below deck, got 55 of his shipmates, and came out and gave his life, not for himself, not for his children, but for us. Our framers said time and time again, we're pledging life, fortune, and sacred honor for ages and millions yet unborn. They knew the eternal impact of the stand that they took. Do we understand the eternal impact of our negligence? Kris Anne gave his life that day in the Boston Massacre so that you and I could sit in this room today, say a prayer, criticize government, freely associate with young terrorists, and not live in fear. There was a poem written about Kris Anne in his day. Honor to Kris Anne, who was leader and voice that day. The first to defy and the first to die with Maverick, Carr, and Gray. Call it riot or revolution, his hand first clenched at the crown. His feet were the first in perilous place to pull the king's flag down. His breast, the first one, rent apart, that liberty's stream might flow. For our freedom now and forever, his head was first laid low. Call it riot or revolution or mob or crowd as you may. Such deaths have been the seed of nations. Such lives shall be honored forever. In Kris Anne's day, they thought we would never forget his name and we would give him public honor. How many of you have ever heard of a man named Ned Hector? Ned Hector was another freed slave who fought in the battles of Brandywine and Germantown. In one of those battles, his unit was given the order to retreat, and he refused. You see, provisions were very hard to come by for the Patriots. And he said, The enemy shall not have my team. I will save the horses or perish myself. He ends up saving the horses and getting a Medal of Honor from George Washington. Because the truth is, in spite of what the revisionists provide, in spite of what the progressives and the haters of this country and our Constitution want to raise our generations believing, there were battalions of freed slaves who fought in our Revolutionary War. There were provisions within the states that said, if you are a slave and you want to fight for liberty, you want to fight for our independence, you are now a free man forever. But we don't even think about that lightly. I mean, we're so careless with that information. If we thought about that for just 1 second, we would have to recognize that some men gave their only free breath for us. And what are we attached to today? Prosperity. Provision. God had that balanced budget. I thought they'd promised us we'd never have this problem again. And now they're telling us the government's going to shut down in October if we don't give them a raise. I say shut her down. Shut her down. This is crazy. And if you think changing Obama out of the office is going to fix the problem, you don't understand what the problem is. Because our conservative Republican Congress has done more damage to our Constitution and more damage to this republic than the president has done in his greatest dreams. All this mess on the border wouldn't be happening if Congress acted constitutionally. What happened in Nevada with the Bureau of Land Management destroying a rancher's property would not have happened if the Congress was acting constitutionally. We are so outside the Constitution. We don't even know what it feels like to be healthy anymore. We have become so dependent on the federal masters. How do we get free? I mean, you guys know. You have people in your group, hardcore limited government. But don't try to take my Medicaid motor scooter. Hardcore limited government. But my kid needs a student loan. I mean, we have to have a revolution of the mind. Because the only cure to this federal dependency is self-sufficiency. And the only key to preserving the Constitution is sovereignty. We have a federal government that's completely out of control. We have an executive branch who thinks it is no longer limited by any ways or means, writing law, overturning law, setting aside law, contrary to the Constitution, and promising to do more. We have a Congress who is unwilling to do its constitutional duty and stop the theft of its power. Through its negligence, through its impotence, our Congress has become instrumental in the destruction of our Constitution and this republic. And the third branch of government offers us no greater solution. This is the Supreme Court that declared that national health care was a power constitutionally vested in the federal government. This is the Supreme Court that said the EPA has the right to make law in the form of regulation and rule over us on carbon emissions. Never once addressing that the EPA does not constitutionally exist. Congress is a complete and utter overhaul. As long as you have a congressional institution like a Speaker of the House or a majority leader that holds more power than any other representative in that body, you will never have a Congress or a Senate that works the way it's supposed to. Article 5, the last clause in Article 5 says that each state will have equal suffrage in the Senate. We haven't had equal suffrage in the Senate since at least the ratification of the 17th Amendment. When you have a leader, a House Speaker, a committee chairman that can decide whether an issue comes to the floor or not, can bury the voice of the people, you do not have equal suffrage. Do you know what is one of the most offensive congressional terms that we have? Senior member. Freshman member. Do you know what that means? That means the person that you elect cannot represent you equally. You have no equal voice in Congress anymore. Because just by a label, your representative has been made superior or inferior by the date of his election. We do not have 3 co-equal branches of government. That is a lie that we have been taught. We do not have 3 co-equal branches of government. We were never intended to have 3 co-equal branches of government. Congress was vested with the most power. They were supposed to be the most powerful branch of the federal government because the House is the direct representatives of the people to be directly ruled and reigned by the people. The Senate, direct representatives of the states. That's why there's 2 senators for every state, because the Senate doesn't represent you. The Senate represents Georgia. And when we moved to the 17th Amendment and put our senators on direct election by the people, we completely lost that understanding of that. And we became closer and closer to being a democracy. Something that I hope we fight to our last breath to prevent. Congress had the most power, and guess what? Do you know who has the most power out of Congress? The House. The House has more power than any entity in Washington, D.C. Article 1, Section 7 gives the House of Representatives alone the power of the purse. James Madison said, "We did that on purpose. We did that on purpose because the House are the direct representatives of the people that are best fit to know the will of the people, and putting the power of the purse is the most valuable tool in the hands of the people to redress their grievances." The House alone funds and defunds. Article 1, Section 7 says the Senate may propose amendments, but they don't have to be involved if the House doesn't want them to be. And the Senate is not, and the President is not even mentioned. Do you know, if our conservative Republican House hated Obamacare like they say, they could defund it right now.
Right.
Article 1, Section 7 gives them the power to defund it right now. If they were outraged at what's going on the border, they could defund anything that the President is doing that they don't like. How is it that we don't have the resources to seal off our border? But do you know, we just sent, I think, $68 billion to Qatar to fund the Muslim Brotherhood. From March of this year to now, we have sent almost, $6.8 billion to Qatar. And we're about to spend another $1.2 million in the Ukraine. As a Russian linguist, I can tell you we got no business in that fight.
That's right.
No business whatsoever. We're supposed to be big on democracies. Why don't we allow Ukraine to have a democratic vote on whether they want to be independent or with Russia? They've never had that. I'll tell you why. Because I got a sneaky suspicion that the people of Ukraine, in the greater majority, would rather stay with Russia. We got no business in that fight. And we're poking our fingers in the stinking bear. And we are the weakest we've ever been, and we cannot deal with this. Congress could defund all this. Congress is tired of the king. Listen to me, that was Freudian, wasn't it? The president sending troops places without a declaration of war. Congress is irate about that, so why aren't they defunding it? They have the powers, but they don't have a spinal cord.
That's right.
Do you know what they have? They don't have a spinal cord. They have a political pole up their backside that says we can't do what's right because guess what? It's not politically advantageous.
Right.
If they were really upset about the way the Department of Justice operates, they would have impeached Eric Holder a long time ago. Article 2, Section 4. Article 2, Section 4 says Congress shall remove from office the President, the Vice President, and all civil officers for a list of things to include high crimes and misdemeanors. Do you remember on June 28 of 2012, 255 House members found Eric Holder guilty of criminal contempt? That is a federal crime. Article 2, Section 4 demands, commands, and requires Congress on June 28, 2012 to impeach Eric Holder. They have no choice. It said they shall. But because it's not politically advantageous, what did they do? Two things they did by refusing to impeach Eric Holder. And you watch the timeline on how this works. Two things they did by refusing to impeach Eric Holder when everybody in Washington, D.C., regardless of how ignorant they claimed themselves to be, everyone in Washington, D.C. knew they had to because of Article 2, Section 4. They declared this administration above the law. Go watch the timeline of everything that happened. After they declared Eric Holder superior to the law, Katie barred the door because the train's under control. If we had impeached Eric Holder, there would have been no Benghazi. If we had impeached Eric Holder, there would have been no Loris Lerner trials, no HHS trials, or, I'm sorry, not even trials, right? They're just congressional hearings.
Yeah.
There would have been none of that because we would have set the precedent that yes, even this administration is bound by the law. Second thing that Congress did when they refused to impeach Eric Holder, they declared themselves superior to the Constitution. Because Article 2, Section 4 required his impeachment. And they said, oh, the Constitution requires that? Not for us. We're special. You wonder why? Every time you write a congressman, you get the same response that everybody else wrote. You ever try to sit down and speak to your state senator? Oh my goodness. Do you know why that happens? Alexander Hamilton told us in Federal 78. He said, no constitution, no legislative act contrary to the Constitution can be valid. He said, to deny that will make the servants above the masters and the representatives of the people superior to the people themselves. Because once Congress declares themselves superior to the Constitution, what they're really doing is declaring themselves superior to us. Because we, the people, are the Constitution. Our people are never going to understand this unless we bring them this truth. So much revision, so many lies. How many of you ever heard this? It's the small foxes that spoil the vine. Have you ever seen a surveyor on the side of the road? Do you know if they're undertaking a massive project? Where I live right where I-10 and I-75 intersect. So envision the beginning of Interstate 10, which runs from one coast to the other. Those surveyors had to start in Jacksonville and project where that interstate would go all the way through Nevada or through Arizona, right? If they're off by that much in Jacksonville, they're off by hundreds of miles in Arizona. That's the way history works. That's the way truth works. A little lie this big 30 years ago is a big lie today. We like to teach our daughters that the women during our constitutional period were irrelevant and weak. You know, because the Constitution was written by those overbearing, chauvinistic white guys who hated everybody but themselves and their money. Because, you know, you can't attack the Constitution with truth. You can't attack it with historical facts, so you have to name, call, and make up lies. And so we have to teach our daughters to hate the men who wrote the Constitution because even they oppressed their wives. And so they'll hate the men, they'll hate the document. And if they hate the document, then it has no meaning, right? And if you can raise up generations of people who hate the document that has no meaning, now, who wins in that?
The Marxists.
Well, if the government is limited by the Constitution, and its power is defined by the Constitution, if it's a worthless document that means nothing, that means the federal government is no longer limited by it, no longer defined by it. That means the only limitation for the federal government is what? Its own will. So you wonder why Common Core is something that our government schools need to be teaching now, so they can teach the destruction and the deconstruction of our Constitution, so that our federal government can raise up children who are subjects and not sovereigns. Right? On my website, which is KrisAnneHall.com, I wrote an article called Stolen Education, Stolen Children, Stolen Future, outlining the Marxist takeover of our education system that began in 1885. The error this big in 1885 is Common Core in 2014. The truth of the matter is, the women sacrificed more than the men for our career. They were powerful, they were brave. My favorite founding mother is a woman named Mercy Otis Warren. And if you don't know Mercy, you ought to. Mercy was the first American woman playwright. She wrote plays, satirical plays, making fun of the British government to help aid in the liberty movement. She was self-educated, and she wrote Shakespearean-style plays. That woman's got some brains. She's the first American woman historian. She wrote a 3-volume set on the rise, the progress, and determination of the Revolutionary War. She said, I lived it, and that perspective needs to be told. Mercy was a confidant, an advisor to John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. These men looked to her for advice, even when they heard what they didn't want to hear. Mercy called it like it was, and she was known for being bold and plain in her speech. We all know about the Boston Tea Party, right? Do you know who held the second Tea Party meeting? I'll give you a clue. It wasn't Ron Paul or Rick Santelli. It was the women. Just 10 months after after the men threw tea in the harbor, the women got together under the leadership of a woman by the name of Penelope Barker. They met in the home of Elizabeth King in Edenton, North Carolina, and they took a pledge. We will purchase no English-made goods until the laws that have enslaved our people are repealed. Now that doesn't mean as much to us as it should, because we also teach lies about the Boston Tea Party. We teach lies about the Revolutionary War. We like to say that we went to war with Great Britain over taxes, because taxed enough already spells tea, and it's really fun to do that. But it was not about taxes. It was about liberty. You see, Great Britain had gone into debt defending the British colonies in the French and Indian War, and then decided that the British colonies should have to pay back that entire debt by themselves. Now, for us, that doesn't sound cruel and unusual, because obviously Great Britain defending the colonists' land and their prosperity, they should have to pay that back. But we only think that to be okay because we're not colonists. You see, when you're a colonist, that means you're no different than a colonist in Great Britain. You're no different than a subject in Great Britain, a subject in India, a subject in Africa. Wherever Great Britain has colonies, the subjects are treated with the same laws and the same duties. And so they singled out the colonists to pay this back. And the colonists said, wait a minute, we're really sort of getting tired of this now. This legislation, these laws that you keep passing, not taxes, these laws that you keep passing on us are being done without our representation in Parliament. Now, Parliament responds by saying, don't be ridiculous. Of course you have representation in Parliament. We have people in Parliament who have volunteered to represent your interests. The colonists said, wait a minute. If they're all the way over there across the sea, creating laws to be enforced on us over here, and they never have to come over here and live under those laws, then they cannot represent us. I mean, I really think that's a lesson we need to learn today. That when the people who are writing the laws exempt themselves from those laws, those people cannot and do not represent us. They're not a representative government if they're not subject to laws. So Parliament doesn't hear their cries because there's no representation. So they start imposing consumption taxes. My economics people know what that is. Consumption tax is like sales tax. Items on goods that you consume. Linen, lumber, sugar, tea, paper, ink. And then Britain gets, the British government gets this brilliant idea. We can maximize our revenue from these consumption taxes by mandating that the colonists purchase the taxed items. And if they go around us and purchase things that are not on our monopoly roll, we will arrest them, throw them into prison, and we'll transport them to Quebec to have a trial. Now, in order to find people who have violated the Stamp Act, they had to get into the people's homes and in their businesses. Now, the colonists were not opening their doors wide. Because you see, we didn't invent the Fourth Amendment. The colonists had a right to be secure in their purses, houses, papers, and effects as well from unreasonable searches and seizures. They knew their liberty charters much better than we do. So Parliament passed this law called Writs of Assistance that gave the custom agents and the tax collectors the authority to have handwritten warrants. Warrants with no due process. Warrants with the arbitrary decision of each individual agent, standing at the door. What's your name? Okay, Colonist Smith. Right, that's why they're called handwritten. They're literally written on the doorstep. Colonist Smith, by the authority vested in me by the king, you will now allow me to in your home to search and seize whatever I believe to be illegal. Sign me. So they're denying people
for liberty. See, the tea that went in the harbor was the East India Trading Company tea. Not by accident or by random selection, but on purpose. Because it was the East India Trading Company tea that was the government-mandated tea. We didn't go to war over taxes. We went to war over legislation without representation, over mandated purchases, warrantless searches, denial of due process, foreign courts, and foreign law. They weren't screaming, taxed enough already. If anything, they'd have been yelling, tyrannized enough already. And these women said, we will purchase no English-made goods until the laws that have enslaved our people are repealed. I want you to listen to that language. It's very strong language. They're telling you that mandated purchases are slavery. But it's just amazing the courage of these women. Because these were not women of no reputation. These were women who carried the names of men of great reputation. And they made this statement. Now remember, our feminists want us to believe that these women were weak and irrelevant and they would have never stood up to do anything. Listen to their words. We are signing our name to a document, not hiding ourselves behind costumes like the men in Boston did at their tea party. The British will know who we are. Does that sound like a woman who's afraid and oppressed by her overbearing chauvinistic husband, calling out the men as cowards for hiding behind costumes? Yeah. But you know what's even more amazing than that? They sent their names to Great Britain, and their names were the same names as men, most of them English merchants. Now you know, signing the pledge that they would purchase no English-made goods as soon as the British government got the name of these English merchants, those men had no longer had their jobs. What's even worse and more likely, they were immediately charged with treason and could be shot on sight. Those women knew that. And they were declaring that the liberty that they were standing for was worth more than a paycheck and worth more than the lives of the men who lived at home. Mercy said, we will stand against tyranny today, or our children will bow. We are a generation of people who will, not might, not may, who will handle the less liberty than we inherited ourselves. We have become pacified in our prosperity. We have become lazy in our luxury. If the people of America fought for liberty as hard as they fought to keep their government entitlements, we wouldn't be in this mess. And if we had a constitutional Congress, we would be operating at a surplus that we can't even conceive. It all begins with you. You can't quit. You gotta be focused. Liberty focused. I know that there is a huge pull for power and leadership of your conservative groups. Politicians at election time are your best friends. Everybody wants to attend your meeting to come and speak, and then they're out the door after they're done. They will not stay and be educated. They will not come to the meetings when they're not being taught. They'll give you some great excuse. Oh, well, you know the life of the campaign trail is very hard. We're very busy. Are you kidding me? Who in this room is not busy? I want to know who in this room is not busy. Who in this room does not have a family, a home to clean, dishes to wash, laundry to do, lawns to mow, food to eat, and every once in a while you get some sleep? On top of everything that you do for defending liberty. We should be insulted by that. personality worship of our politicians instead of understanding that they're employees and subjects to us. We should, as grass leaders groups, put our people above the politicians. And tell these people, you want to come speak to our group, fine, but you'll be the last one, and if you're not here, when we start, you're not speaking. You have to listen to us first. That's exactly right. We have put them in a position where they think that they're superior to us and they no longer have to listen to us. And nothing in government, from your county commission, your city council, to your school board, to your sheriff and your state, nothing in government is going to change until we have a revolution of the mind and we flip this paradigm back to where it needs to be and make sure that those we elect are employed by us. We are their supervisors. They work for us. And if they do not listen to us, they're gone. Period. It doesn't matter what letter is behind their name. We have got to break this mentality of the voting for the lesser of two evils. I don't know how many of you are Christians here, but as a Christian, you cannot vote the lesser of two evils. Because that means you're voting evil. If you vote the lesser of two evils, do not ask God to bless this country, because God cannot bless evil, no matter how you justify it. I would rather you not vote at all. I know that's almost political heresy today. But you know what? God has a commandment to righteousness, not a commandment to vote. And when we vote the lesser of two evils, we do two things. We declare we have no faith and God is dead. See, I believe that God is good and He's a living God. And I believe that God always gives us a good choice. Always. And what we do when we give in to the lesser of two evils is we say God's good is not electable in this country. And we wonder why we're in the mess we're in. I would love for us to just haul off and trust God. Just haul off and trust God. So what? We get the guy we don't want. Maybe things get so bad for a short while that the people wake up, stand up and fight for what is right and what is good. I think we have pacified and placated the people so long, they don't care anymore. I frankly don't think that we know what bad is anymore, because we've been gradually becoming bad for so long. No longer voting the lesser of two evils means that we have to choose good, trust God, and you have to run. You gotta find candidates that are worthy of our vote. And then haul off and do everything you can. I want to suggest to you start local. If you have a constitutionally minded city council or a constitutionally minded county commission, you won't care what the federal government is doing. Because your local government will stand up and say, hey, federal government, even the Supreme Court says you have no power over us. And we will not implement your regulations here. Your EPA is not welcome. Your FDA is not welcome. Your BLM is not welcome here. We can take care of ourselves. If you have a constitutional sheriff, you won't care about your county, your city, or the state, or the federal government. Because if you have a constitutional sheriff, your sheriff will stand up and say, I'm sorry, but I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, which means even domestic people can be enemies to my Constitution. And if you are trying to perpetrate an attack on my people and their liberty, I will not allow you to do that, and I don't care what you call yourself. The constitutional sheriff has the power to do that. If you have a constitutionally minded school board, can you imagine what kind of school district you would have? You get a constitutionally minded city council, constitutionally minded county commission, constitutionally minded city school board, constitutionally minded sheriff, and you will take over your state. Turn your local governments into crucibles to create constitutional candidates, because that's where your power is. You spend $10 and 10 hours on a local election, you'll get the candidate that you want. You send $10 to your federal senator, all you've done is buy him a steak dinner.
Right.
And that's all the regard he's going to give you. We need to get our backyards clean and stop complaining about the neighbors. Lots of truth we need to know. We owe it to our children. John Adams, in 1777, wrote to Abigail and said this: posterity, you will never know what it cost this present generation to secure your liberty. I hope you will make good use of it. For if you do not, I shall repent in heaven that I ever took half the pains to preserve it. What do you think John Adams is thinking right now about what we're doing with the liberty that he sacrificed for?
He's old.
The good news is, it's not too late. It absolutely is not too late. One of the greatest advantages that we have is that our framers created a constitutional republic and not a kingdom. In a kingdom, your only option when the government goes crazy is revolution and chopping off heads. They made a constitutional republic where it was a government of the people, by the people, for the people. A government where instituted among men, deriving its just powers from the consent of the governed, with an inherent right to alter or abolish any government that worked contrary to those means. They gave us a government run by the people. We are the kings. And they gave us a union of sovereign states. Our states can fix all this problem right now. Your state has more power than your congressman. Because your state can stand up and say, sorry, we don't need the federal government anymore. We're going to take care of ourselves. But we watch out. Any heroin addict will tell you. Although being drug-free is the best way to live, getting there is hell. We are so addicted to federal money. So addicted that there are going to be convulsions. There are going to be withdrawals. But imagine what it would be like to feel happy again. And that's what our children deserve, right? So I'll leave you with the words of Winston Churchill. Still, if you will not fight, when the victory is sure and not too costly. If you will not fight, when the victory is sure and the odds are in your favor, you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. He said there may even be a worse case, though. You may have to fight when there is no hope. Because it's better to perish than to live as a slave. You and I will never see that last consequence. We're too old. If history repeats as it should, and we do nothing, we won't see that last consequence. But what we will do is condemn on future generations the need to buy back a gift that was supposed to be purchased for them by us. And they won't do it at the ballot box. They will do it with their money. Tomorrow, I hope that you will come. Can you think of at least 3 people who should have been sitting next to you now? So bring them tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be able to do so much more. Teach so much more truth. arm our patriots with so much more. Because this is a battle. Make no mistake. But this is not a battle between Democrats and Republicans or even tyranny. This is a spiritual battle. And we need to be properly armed. So I want to thank you for listening to me today. Did I teach you something?
Yeah.
Good.
We have question and answer time. If we have a question.
Let me mention to you the rules.
Yes.
You have to ask the question. Okay? If you want to have a discussion, we can do that later, but I got carried away, so we don't have a lot of time, so you need to ask a question. And then again, remember, I don't know everything, so I will tell you I don't know the answer to the question. Yes, sir.
You heard the Tom Hanks observation that while people may be kept ignorant, if they ever lose their ignorance, there's no way to restore it.
Well, Thomas Jefferson wrote in a letter, I think it was to Hamlet, that if a nation wishes to be ignorant and free, it wishes for what never was and never will be.
This is a great audience for you, obviously, because we're kind of, we agree with you. You speak a lot to not so friendly audiences. Or do you get invited to speak, and what's their response if you ever?
Okay, so a lot is a quantitative word, and I would say no, not a lot. But I do speak to groups that are not required. I speak to bar associations. It's probably my oldest household crowd. I spent a week in Washington, D.C. teaching in Constitution Hall to people who came for church services. So they were not grassroots patriots. They were just everyday Joe Christians. And I can tell you that I never heard from the ones who didn't like what I had to say. But I heard from many who said, thank you, I've never heard that before. I do every once in a while have people who come who don't like what I have to say. And I offered to discuss it with them, but I've yet to have a real conversation with anybody because they always degrade to name calling and you can't get to the truth. I debated a liberal law professor at the University of Miami, and I use that word debate very loosely because I gave a presentation on history and I'm not quite sure what she did. But the topic was interpretation of the Constitution, and her defense was supposed to be living, breathing. And of course, my defense is original intent. Because original intent is not only the only historical way, the only hermeneutical way to interpret the Constitution, but it's also the only legal way to interpret the Constitution. Because the Constitution is a legally binding contract. You have to interpret it via contract law principles. And contract law principles will not allow the Constitution to be a living, breathing document any more than it allows your employment contract with your employer to be a living, breathing document. I mean, would you sign a contract with your employer where the employer can come back and say, well, 10 years later, I know we made this promise to you, but it doesn't really matter because it's a living, breathing document. It only matters what we want it to be now, right? We didn't anticipate this, so, whatever. I do have the opportunity to do that. There's a video on my website where I was invited to be on a panel, on a national telecast panel on the Second Amendment. And one of the attorneys on the panel was some guy who had gotten a lot of airtime on CNN, apparently a big CNN celebrity, and I had a lot of fun with him too. So that's on my website. You can go watch that video. It's a lot of fun to watch. They're really very easy to defeat, actually, because they don't have any skill. They have volume, and they have names, and that's it.
do a lot of work with our legislators in Georgia.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. And for some reason, none of them seem to believe that Georgia is a sovereign state, and we can tell the feds we can't do that. They're all scared to death.
No, they're all federal supremacists. We have raised generations of federal supremacists. I deal with that myself. My Florida legislature has the same thing. When I first became aware of nullification, okay, I didn't read anybody's book. Everybody says, do you read this book? Do you read that book? No, I don't read books. I read letters. I read papers. I read what the framers wrote themselves. Because I don't want to be, I'm a writer. I'm an educator. I don't want to be influenced by someone else's opinion about what they said. It's just so much easier, so much more efficient to read them themselves. And so when I stumbled on this nullification thing, it really was stumbling because I was reading the framers. I got really excited about it. I thought, this is it. I mean, this is so easy. It's so straightforward. We can stop this mess right now. It's legally sound. It's constitutionally right. I marched myself up to my Florida Senate. It was a judicial committee meeting to whether they should establish the healthcare exchanges or not. So I signed up for my time to speak. I had over 30 people there yield their time to me, which means technically I had like 90 minutes because everybody got 3 minutes. And I started speaking about the sovereign duty of the states to deny this dangerous federal intrusion and to stand for the people. It did not go over well. They tried to shut me down several times. It rioted up and behind me several times. And I took my seat. Well, after that Senate meeting, the Senate president came in. He was not in the meeting. And so somebody had me come talk to the Senate president, introduce me to him. His name is Don Gates. And it was a friend of mine who introduced us. And I have to know that he had that sort of evil laugh when he was introducing us because he knew what he was doing. I did not. Totally green, okay? Nothing, knew nothing. Just starting off on this. And I said, Mr. Gates, I'm so excited to meet you. This is when I thought I could actually teach politicians. I'm so excited to meet you. He said, oh, it's nice to meet you too, Mrs. Hall. I said, well, I hope we'll be seeing more of each other. He said, oh, that'd be great. I said, really? I said, because I'd love to come and talk to the Senate about nullification. You'd have thought I slapped him in the face with a wet fish. Okay? He literally takes 2 steps backwards, cocks his hip and looks at me and says, nullification, huh? I guess the Supreme Court didn't get your memo. And I'm like, who is this guy talking to me like that? You know, what does he think is? I said, my memo? I guess they didn't get Madison, Hamilton, or Jefferson's memo either then, huh? He says, oh, Madison, huh? Talked to Madison lately?
Oh, my gosh.
I said, well, a matter of fact, I have. It's called the Federalist Papers. Maybe you want to read them every now and again. At which point, he realizes I'm not his average person who always backs down and defers to his enemies, right? So he turns his back on me, starts waving his hand and mumbling things about dead people and irrelevancies. So I'm shocked at the way I've been spoken to, because I was told he was a conservative Republican, right? So he's walking out the door, and I'm still standing there going, and I'm going to tell you what, when I get in these things, I'm zoned. I have no idea of my surroundings. It's like tunnel vision. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just me and him in the room. He gets about as far away from me as the man in the green tie. And I yell at him. I said, hey, Mr. Gates, it's back to me. I said, I thought you called yourself a constitutional conservative Republican. He turns around and points his finger at me, spins on his heels and says, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I said, well, maybe it's about time you learn something about that document, don't you think? At which point he realizes something that I am clueless of. This was a recently adjourned Senate committee meeting, and there's a whole crowd of people behind me watching what's going on. Some of them press. His whole demeanor changes.
Oh, Miss Hall, I'd be happy to hear anything you have to say. Just send me an email. So I did. And you can find what I sent him on my website. It's a 5-page primer on nullification. I kept it short, so
Hours.
he sent me back an email.
We did.
He told me that I should be shot or hanged.
That sounds familiar.
Yes.
He told me that I should be shot or hanged for suggesting that the states were sovereign over the federal government.
This is great.
The reason I say that is because ours, we had a bill in for nullification we're going to try to get through. And another one saying declaring Georgia a sovereign state. The legislative council.
You don't have to do that. The 10th Amendment already does, by the
Well,
way.
I get it, but these guys got, it's the same thing, they have to read a little bit, maybe understand that stuff, Legislative council, we got letters back from them saying that what we're doing is seditious and treasonous. And I've got all letters, and it's like, you cited federal code, U.S. what?
I'm going to cite federal law to show you how you are not sovereign over the federal government.
Yes. So, but we've been trying to crack through these
You
guys.
send them back a letter and say, all of your letters teach us that you are illiterate and incompetent.
Yeah.
So how'd you get it like?
So,
What would have happened if I had sent Senator Don Gates a letter telling him he needed to be shot or hanged?
Oh, let's see the black.
Do you know the
Blackest-
Huffington Post confronted him on that? Yeah, he laughed it off. He said, of course we're not going to shoot or hang people. I just wanted Miss Hall to realize that we could disagree and still remain civil.
So, Kris Anne, you're saying anti-nullification legislature, are they pushing the Article 5 convention?
Do we have to go there? Okay, so, yes, probably. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because what they know that most Article 5 advocates do not know or refuse to accept is that an Article 5 convention will be run by Congress. And it just absolutely reinforces the federal supremacy. And if you don't believe me, I did a week-long series on my radio show. I spent 5 days, an hour every day, going over the congressional opinion on what an Article 5 convention will look like according to Congress. It's absolutely stunning. And I was in day 3. I'm already getting messages from the Goldwater Institute telling me, oh, we've got a plan for this, Kris Anne. We don't need to be talking about this. We've got this all fixed. We don't need to talk about this. I'm getting attacked by people I have no idea who they are, attacking me personally, and not even addressing the concerns that I'm putting forward, because I didn't put them forward as my opinion, I put them forward as concerns. I said, because I'm not anti-Article 5. You can't be a constitutionalist and be against an Article 5 convention. It's in the Constitution. But you see, Article 5, for accessible Article 5 convention, you have to have sovereign states. And if you deny nullification because our states are not sovereign, then you're not having a convention of the states, you're having a convention of people run by Congress.
Or worse.
So I wrote this article on my website because I got banned from Mark Levin's Facebook page. And I got tired of this hating mentality. Because there are people who are for nullification who are anti-Article 5.
Yep.
And they can be just as hateful as the Article 5 people. So I wrote this article on my website. Article 5 versus nullification, an adult conversation. Because I got tired of all this schoolyard childish bickering. It's just ridiculous. Because no general goes into the battle with one plan. Michael Ferris admitted to me that the minimum time frame for successful Article 5 convention is 5 years. Minimum. Now, I think that's extremely conservative. I think it's more like 10 when you count all the lawsuits that are going to come and all the challenges and all that. 10 years. But even at their 5 years, I'm looking at the TikTok clock. We don't have 5 years to fix this problem.
Nullification since the days.
So you want Article 5 convention? Go for it. But you better have nullification now to buy you the time to get there. And the sneaking suspicion I have is if you engage in nullification now, you're going to find 5 years down the road you don't need Article 5.
Exactly.
My biggest problem with Article 5 is the same problem that James Madison had with Article 5 of Federalist 49. And no one, not Michael Ferris, not any of them, have been able to answer this question for me. Who are the delegates and what are their motivations? That was Madison's concern. Madison said in Federalist 49, I'll remind you that the only reason we came, and I'm paraphrasing of course, but he says, I'll remind you, the only reason we have a successful convention now is because we just came from a bloody revolution. And the horror of what we saw made us put aside our personal ambitions and our greeds and kept us focused on liberty. He said, absent that motivation, a convention in the future will be run by people who are greedy, full of personal ambition, want political power and personal gain. And he said this, he said, we will end up asking the same people who created the problem to fix it.
Well, this is what they told us in the hearings, and we testified in the hearings against this. They said the same thing, said, how do we get picked as a delegate?
Yeah.
It's the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker pro tem in one, but they wrote 3 different pieces of legislation. They all do different things, but they all come back to Article 5. So they couldn't even get that right. And they figured they're going to fix this, and their reasoning said that, well, we're going to force Congress to do this.
How? Okay, no, I've heard that. We're going to force Congress to do that. How do you do that? We're going to sue them.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You're going to sue Congress in federal court. Who appoints the federal judges? Hello? Okay, so what happens then? It's like this whole ridiculous idea about Congress suing the president. It is reckless, it is stupid, it is dangerous. It's unnecessary.
It's kabuki theater.
Yeah.
Kabuki theater.
Yeah.
Well, look at this though. You sue Congress in federal court. You sue the president in federal court. What happens when the federal courts, whose judges' livelihood is dependent upon the federal government, depending specifically upon the executive branch, rule in favor of Congress or in favor of the president? What is your recourse? Two solutions. Only 2 things can happen. Oh, well, no, 3. Number 1, the states in the Article 5 lawsuit or Congress in the presidential lawsuit will have to lay prostrate before the courts and declare them the ultimate rulers of the universe.
Yes.
And then we will now be run by an oligarchy. Okay? 2, they'll do what they were supposed to do in the first place and nullify on the state issue, or as far as the Congress, and start defunding and impeaching, which they should have done before they wasted all our time and our money in the beginning. And it'll be even harder now, because all the proponents and the naysayers and the supremacists will say, well, the court said so, so you don't have any choice. Number 3, revolution of the people. Because the people will not live under this forever. They will not. Come tomorrow, and I will prove that to you. I will prove that. Let me tell you about a couple things that we have going on. My book's out there. I'll tell you about those if you want to go outside. And the DVD set is of the workshop that we're having tomorrow. 265 times I taught in 22 states last year. I have no speaking fees. I do not make any group reimburse me for travel or accommodations. This is a ministry, a mission for me. We operate solely what we bring in from the books, and people donate because they believe in what we're doing. And I'm going to tell you what, I wouldn't want it any other way. Because we are able to speak to people into groups that couldn't afford to bring me in if I had a speaking fee. Because what I teach, and I believe this in my heart, is absolutely essential to preserving this union and saving the liberty for our children. Which means, of course, that if you want me to come and speak to your group, there are no excuses. It's not going to cost you anything. Second, this week, I have a brand new book being released, and you're going to love it. It's called Sovereign Duty. It's all about the sovereign duty of the states and the sovereign duty of the individuals to control the federal government. The legal mechanisms, the constitutional mechanisms, and the duty to natural law and God to do these things. And the whole book, 200 pages, is dedicated to that very issue. And I'm looking for volunteers that are willing to get the book and put it into the hands of these federal supremacists. Not their aides, them.
Oh, yeah.
And say, I will be back in 30 days to ask you about the content of this book. And if you cannot respond to the content, you don't have to agree with it. But if you cannot respond to the content, I will work against you. And I don't care what your name is, Republican or Democrat. I was approached last year by a film crew who works with Focus on Family. The workshop that I'm teaching tomorrow, they want to turn into a documentary. And so we're working on that project. We're about to release a trailer that we filmed so that we can start fundraising for that as well. So we don't quite know how much it's going to cost, but it's not going to be me standing in front of a group and lecturing. It's going to be shot in 30-minute episodes so that it can be aired on HBO, the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, or the Learning Channel, something like that, some cable network. And we're not going to be lecturing. We're actually going to go where the history happened. So the first 9 episodes will be filmed in Great Britain. We're going to be where the 1100 Charter of Liberty was signed. We're going to be at Runnymede, where the Magna Carta took place. And so we're going to bring people to the history. Can you imagine a cable network that would carry this so that this could be in every house, in every school, in every classroom, in every church? Oh, by the way, I teach in churches too. I have a religious liberty message that I teach in churches that is similar to the First Amendment lesson that I teach, which teaches a biblical responsibility of Christians to defend liberty as a gift from God. And so that, again, is another reason why I don't charge a speaking fee, because I'd like to get in as many churches as I can. I'm a Baptist pastor's wife, and I've taught 4 Catholic masses on Long Island.
There is forgiveness in that.
That's all right. I speak to more Catholic churches than I do evangelical churches.
Why is that?
Because, frankly, the evangelical churches have become slaves to their 501c3. And they fear man more than they fear God. So, come tomorrow, and we'll have a whole lot more fun. Go to my website, download my podcasts. If you have a smartphone, an Apple, or an iPhone, I have a free mobile app that you can download by just going to your app store and searching my name, Kris Anne Hall, and you can download my mobile app, bring all my articles, all my podcasts. I started something new in the last week. I'm doing daily devotionals now. So on my website, you can get those through my mobile app. There are daily devotionals that I publish every